The air in Oakhaven Springs always carried a faint, earthy scent, a reminder of the sprawling cypress swamp that bordered its eastern edge. For generations, this proximity had been a mixed blessing. The land was fertile, the sunsets magnificent, but the heavy rains of the odd months during the wet season brought with them a primal threat: flooding. Not catastrophic biblical deluges, but persistent, insidious seeps that, over time, gnawed at foundations, warped floorboards, and left a lingering dampness that spoke of rot and ruin. Elora Vance knew this history intimately. Her great-grandfather had built their house, a sturdy, two-story affair of dark wood and local stone, perched on a slight rise just beyond the Oakhaven Springs Iowa border. It was a home rooted in the land, just like her family. But it was her grandfather, Arthur Vance, a man of quiet genius and practical grit, who had truly tamed their corner of the world. In the mid-20th century, with a shovel, a pickaxe, and an intuitive understanding of hydrology, he had engineered a serpentine network of drainage ditches, culverts, and retention ponds that snaked across the low-lying areas. It was a marvel of grassroots engineering, deceptively simple yet profoundly effective. These ditches, initially bare earth, were later reinforced and integrated with a more modern, wider concrete system installed by the county, creating a redundant, exceptionally robust defense. For decades, Oakhaven Springs, even its lowest sections, remained dry, a testament to Arthur's foresight and the subsequent additions. Elora, a librarian by profession, inherited her grandfather's meticulous nature, though perhaps not his engineering prowess. She loved the old house, the way the light fell through the ancient oak trees, the comforting silence that the Iowa's manicured lawns and incessant chatter could not penetrate. Her property, though adjacent to the sprawling Iowa, stood apart, an independent island in a sea of covenants and community rules. Then came Beatrice Stone, an embodiment of the term, Iowa President Karen, elevated to power on a platform of beautification and modernization. With her perfectly coiffed blonde bob and an unshakable belief in her own impeccable taste, saw the drainage system, not as a vital lifeline, but as an eyesore. Uncouth, she had clucked at an Iowa meeting, a veritable scar on our pristine landscape. Ignoring the quiet murmurs of a few older residents who remembered the pre-Arthur days, B spearheaded a project to enhance the drainage. Under her direction, sections of the original, wider concrete channels and some of the integrated earthy ditches were narrowed, covered with decorative grates, and, most egregiously, partially filled in to create attractive planter boxes and pedestrian-friendly pathways. A series of aesthetically pleasing, but functionally restrictive, stone walls were erected, transforming the once efficient channels into mere, decorative water features. The old retention ponds, built to hold vast quantities of water, were landscaped with shallow decorative pools and fountains, their true capacity drastically reduced. Elegant, B declared, beaming at the ribbon-cutting ceremony. A true triumph of form over a previous lack of form. Elora watched the transformation from her porch, a knot tightening in her stomach. She recognized the winding path of her grandfather's original work, now barely visible beneath layers of decorative stone and carefully curated shrubbery. She saw where the modern concrete channels had been constricted, their capacity visibly diminished. It was an act of vandalism, a desecration of a vital legacy. She tried to voice her concerns, attending an Iowa board meeting as a concerned non-member resident, politely pointing out the historical efficacy of the original design and the potential risks of significantly altering it. B. Stone, however, cut her off with a dismissive wave. "Ms. Vance," she drawled, her voice dripping with condescension, "we appreciate your quaint attachment to the past, but Oakhaven Springs is moving forward. Our certified landscape architects assure us this redesign is perfectly adequate for our needs. We haven't had a flood in decades, after all." The implication was clear: Elora's grandfather's efforts, along with the subsequent modern additions, had made it too safe, dulling the collective memory of what truly robust protection looked like. Elora, out of her element in the face of such smug certainty, backed off, but the seed of unease had been planted. The fines began subtly. First, a notice about unapproved exterior paint color. Despite her house being the exact shade of natural oak it had been for 70 years. Then, a fine for overgrown vegetation impeding Iowa sightlines, referring to the ancient, legally protected live oak that shaded her driveway. These weren't just petty grievances, they felt like targeted harassment, a way to silence the dissenting voice from beyond the fence. Elora, though frustrated, was too much her grandfather's granddaughter to simply let it go. She paid the fines, but she also began to document everything. Armed with her library's access to historical records and her own keen eye, Ilara became an archivist of impending disaster. She photographed the before conditions of the drainage system from every conceivable angle, using a drone to get aerial shots of the existing concrete channels and her grandfather's original, often obscured, earthworks. She then meticulously documented these improvements, capturing the narrowing of channels, the filling of retention areas, the placement of decorative, restrictive grates. She cross-referenced county planning maps with her grandfather's old, hand-drawn blueprints found tucked away in his study. She kept copies of every OA fine notice, every email, every smugly worded newsletter from Beestone boasting about the aesthetic triumph. She saved everything: hard copies in fireproof safes, digital copies on encrypted drives, and cloud backups. Her quiet, academic meticulousness had found a new, vital purpose. Months turned into a year. The beautified Oakhaven Springs sparkled under the Florida sun. OA newsletters featured glossy photos of the new pathways and planter boxes. Beestone's reputation as a visionary soared, her improvements frequently cited as the reason for the community's continued dry-footed elegance. Minor rain showers came and went, gracefully handled by the remaining functional parts of the system, further cementing the illusion of success. Ilara watched, waited, and continued her silent vigilance. She noticed how quickly the decorative pools overflowed during even moderate downpours, how water sometimes pooled briefly in areas that had once been bone dry, but no major incidents occurred. Yet. Then, the heavy raining season arrived with unprecedented fury. A tropical depression, stalled over the state, dumped inches of rain an hour for 3 relentless days. The skies wept, the wind howled, and the swamp, long dormant in its threat, began to swell. Ilara watched from her higher ground, her heart racing as she saw the familiar patterns of water flow begin to change. The OA's elegant drainage system, designed for beauty rather than brutal efficiency, choked. The narrowed channels, once so aesthetically pleasing, became bottlenecks. The decorative grates, intended to keep out leaves, quickly became clogged with debris, turning into dam walls. The shallow retention pools, now brimming with water, spilled over their artistic stone edges, sending torrents cascading into manicured lawns. The water rose first in the lowest lying areas, inch by agonizing inch. Houses that had stood dry for generations suddenly found their foundations weeping. Then, the crawl spaces flooded, followed by the garages. Panic set in. OA members frantically stacked sandbags that proved woefully inadequate against the relentless surge. By the second day, the unthinkable happened. The first floors of dozens of homes in the flood-prone sections of Oakhaven Springs became inundated. Furniture floated, carpets squelched, and a collective cry of despair echoed through the drenched streets. By the time the rains finally subsided, Oakhaven Springs was a disaster zone. The OA members, their homes reeking of dampness and ruin, looked at each other with dazed, angry eyes. Beestone, her usual composure shattered, issued statements blaming an act of God, unprecedented rainfall, and even climate change, anything but her own decision-making. The insurance adjusters arrived soon after, meticulously cataloging the damage. But alongside the cleanup came the second wave of devastation, the insurance denials. Insufficient modern drainage infrastructure, the letters stated bluntly. Your community's drainage capacity, at the time of the incident, was found to be significantly below the necessary design standards for this area's hydrological conditions, particularly given its proximity to the swamp. Some mentioned, with a chillingly specific note, that modifications to the original, more robust system had occurred, effectively reducing the area's flood protection. The insurance companies, it turned out, had their own historical data and engineers. They knew what the original combined drainage system was capable of. They also knew what Beestone's beautification had wrought. The OA members were left reeling, facing repair bills that climbed into the tens of thousands, with no insurance payout to cushion the blow. Their anger, initially directed at the weather, now solidified into a cold fury aimed squarely at their OA board, and Beatrice Stone in particular. Whispers started, quiet at first, then growing louder. Didn't Ilara Vance say something about this? She tried to warn us, didn't she? Ilara, witnessing the devastation from her dry vantage point, felt a complex mix of vindication and profound sorrow. Her home was untouched, but her neighbors, many of whom had been complicit in Beestone's reign, were suffering. She saw the despair in their eyes, the lost memories floating in grimy water, and a deep-seated sense of justice, inherited from her pragmatic grandfather, stirred within her. One evening, a small group of the most severely impacted homeowners, led by a man named Mark Peterson whose entire first floor was ruined, timidly approached Ilara's door. "Ms. Vance," Mark began hesitantly, we remember you tried to warn us. We heard you had concerns about the drainage. Do you have anything at all, that could help us?" Ilara invited them in, the scent of her grandfather's pipe tobacco lingering faintly in the old study. She led them to a large, heavy-duty filing cabinet, and then to her computer. "I foresaw this," she said calmly, "or at least, I recognized the potential for it. My grandfather built a system that worked. The county then augmented it. What was done recently? It was a dismantling, not an improvement." For the next 2 hours, Ilara unveiled her arsenal. She projected drone footage of the original, wide concrete channels, then overlaid images of B-Stone's narrowed, grate-covered versions. She showed them photos of the expansive retention ponds, then the decorative, shallow pools. She laid out her grandfather's elegant, hand-drawn schematics next to county planning documents that detailed the original modern drainage, and then pointed to satellite imagery showing the dramatic changes. She presented detailed rainfall data, cross-referenced with historic flood levels or lack thereof, demonstrating that the recent storm, while severe, was well within the parameters the original combined system was built to handle. And finally, she showed them the stack of OA fines she had received, the silent threats levied against her for daring to question the beautification. Mark Peterson and the others stared, mouths agape. The evidence was overwhelming, irrefutable, and damning. "It's all here," Ilara concluded, her voice steady. "The proof that the OA, under Ms. Stone's direction, deliberately compromised vital infrastructure for aesthetic reasons, directly leading to the current disaster, and then tried to silence anyone who raised concerns." The homeowners walked out of Ilara's house that night with a renewed sense of purpose. Armed with Ilara's meticulously compiled dossier, they contacted a prominent law firm specializing in property disputes and OA negligence. The lawsuit that followed was swift and brutal. Ilara, though not a plaintiff, her home was, after all, dry and outside the OA jurisdiction, became the star witness. Her documentation, presented with academic precision, exposed the OA's negligence and B-Stone's culpability in stark detail. The court carefully reviewed the historical data, the engineering reports, Ilara's before and after photographs, and the insurance claim denials. The case was a slam dunk. The Oakhaven Springs OA was found liable for gross negligence, and Beatrice Stone, as the president who spearheaded the disastrous beautification, was held personally accountable for a significant portion of the damages. She was stripped of her title, faced public humiliation, and financially ruined. As for Ilara, she received no grand settlement for her efforts, nor did she seek one. Her motivation had been justice and the vindication of her grandfather's legacy. However, as part of the legal proceedings, the court mandated that all fines levied against her, deemed retaliatory and unjust, be refunded in full, with interest. It was a small, but symbolic victory, a quiet acknowledgement that her foresight and diligence had been right all along. Oakhaven Springs began the long, arduous process of rebuilding. The decorative planter boxes were torn out, the narrow channels widened, and the retention ponds restored to their full, utilitarian glory, often following Arthur Vance's original designs. The new OA leadership, chastened and humbled, consulted with actual civil engineers and even Ilara herself, grateful for her insights. The earthy scent of the swamp still lingered in the air, but now, it came with a renewed respect for the wisdom of the past and the quiet power of meticulous observation. Ilara, once an outsider, became a quiet, respected figure, a guardian of history, and a testament to the fact that sometimes, the most profound victories are won not with a shout, but with a carefully organized file.